Okay.
Um, Jason, we do have our zoning administrator here too. So I think to just go around and do quick introductions would be great. I'll
Okay.
start. I'm Mary Jo Gingras with the Ashland County Land Conservation Department.
I'm Dan Grady, County Administrator.
Pat Kinney, County Board.
Bruce Blakeman, Ashland County Zoning.
Riley Jalma, I'm a producer in Ashland County.
Jim Schultz, County Board. Josh Pearson, President of Ashland Bayfield County President or Farmers Union.
Erica Hanikel, Ashland County Grant Writer.
Charlie Ortman, Land and Water Conservation Committee member and Comprehensive Plan Committee member.
Tim Micka, Ashland Bayfield Iron Douglas County Ag Technician.
Carisha Flint, Administrative Assistant.
I'm Brittany Goodis-Weisbecker, Ashland County GIS Coordinator.
And Jason Lallman, Northwest Regional Planning Commission. Is that everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so the first item on our agenda, working item, is the farmland preservation area mapping. So if you recall, this is the area, or the map, I should say, in the original farmland preservation plan that identifies properties that could potentially be eligible for farmland preservation tax credits. Now, there are other criteria that they have to meet besides just being in that zone, but this is the first tier of recognizing which properties are eligible potentially and which are not. Now, I've got a map up here and I want to show you a bit of a challenge that I've come up with, or I've encountered by going through some of the data. And then I want to talk about how you would like to proceed with the mapping process. So let me share my screen. Certainly hope I can do that. And bear with me for a second. Okay.
Perfect. We have a great view.
Okay. So this is pretty straightforward. The area in orange is the area that delineates farmland preservation areas from the previous plan. And you can see that that's scattered throughout the county, all the way from Madeline Island down to the southern border of the county and everywhere in between. So about the only areas that are not predominantly filled in would be the national forest and the reservation and communities, which is pretty standard, I would say, in a heavy ag county. I mean, that's nothing unusual to see that. Now, the criteria upon which this orange area is based is the difficult part of this process. Because per state statute, we need to follow a clearly defined process for identifying farmland preservation areas. So one of the factors that goes into that mix is, does it have prime farmland soils, prime ag soils? Another factor, and probably more important in terms of DAT cap consideration, is that area slated for development within the next 15 years. So theoretically, that orange should contain no land area that is expected to be developed for non-agricultural purposes over the next 15 years. So envision back when this plan was developed, not necessarily from today, but when this data was developed. And we're going to zoom in so you can see again the abundant area of farmland preservation identified here. Now, we were able to get the existing and future land use data from Brittany, and that information is somewhat messy, But there's enough there that we're able to actually pull the classes out, the future land use classifications, and I'm going to turn the labels on for that. It's going to get messy, but you'll get the point here shortly. So this entire block is identified as farmland preservation area. You see the labels that I turned on here say residential, presumably that means residential low density. So we have right out of the gate a potential conflict. Again, at the time that this was developed, because remember that this plan, this comp plan is out of date. It is no longer a enforceable document because it has expired. But I'm just pointing this out to show that when this was developed, we did have areas of residential growth, planned residential growth in our farmland preservation area mapping. And that is something that we can't do going forward. And it's not just residential low density. I encountered residential high density, industrial, other developed uses that fell within the farmland preservation area mapping. When I cross-reference this with the agricultural productivity, the soil types to get prime farmlands, there's a general consistency there. So I'm not at all really concerned with that. I am a bit concerned about this, however, because when we submit the plan, we have to submit along with it the criteria that we used to identify farmland preservation areas. If we're saying that future land use is non-development, then we need to ensure that that's indeed the case. So this doesn't necessarily matter right now because we are going through a whole process to update the comprehensive plan. I'm just bringing this to your attention to show you that when this was put together, as I interpret it, there is an inconsistency here with that future land use being residential and not ag. So what I really would expect to see is all of these would say ag or woodland or non-development or forest, not a developed or more intensive use.
I have a quick question, Jason.
Yeah. Yep.
So which was created first? The farmland preservation layer or the residential low development, low density?
That I don't know. You'd have to look at the timing. So the farmland plan was 2014. I don't know the comp plan dates off the top of my head.
Because
So
how would you know if it's already designated as something? Let's say it was designated as residential low development first.
Yeah.
How would we know? Should there have been like a red flag or something that was notifying
Yes.
when we tried to put the other layer on? And how would this come to be where there's two separate designations that should not overlap each other?
Yeah, that would typically come out in the process of defining farmland preservation areas. So you would take your land use layer and you would parse out future land use, parse out everything that is a development district or zone. So that leaves you with your ag, your forest lands, woodlands, wetlands, all that stuff. That's where you're starting from. So that's basically the constraint of land area that you have to work in the entire county. That first tier of evaluation. I'm not sure how these got in here, and it probably predates, everyone that had worked on this. I would guess, Brittany, this was before your time, right?
yeah, so I was a GIS technician in the Land Conservation Department in 2016. And so I helped create the maps, but I didn't do much with the data itself. I was just kind of handed data. Anyways, so my thoughts would be how do we go about changing the future land use? Because I would suspect that the towns don't necessarily agree with what's in that data set because it's from 2006, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, and we'll get there. We'll get to that part of the discussion.
Yeah.
I have a
But-
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there any way to determine when these areas were designated residential low density?
It would have been in the previous comp planning process.
But
So-
didn't they have to be officially designated through an official process at some point? There should be like a date on each one of
No.
those designations?
No, are you thinking of zoning? This is, because this isn't zoning, this is future land use.
So these are just so some part of the comp plan committee somewhere decided that
Yes,
this would be residential low density, and we decided it would be farmland pres.
yes, exactly.
So the deconflict won't take any official acts. We just gotta decide amongst us if we want to leave some areas residential low density and take them out of farmland preservation and vice versa.
Yes, here's where things get complicated. So we might as well jump, unless there are any more questions about what this orange data layer is showing, we can start talking about resolution.
Okay.
I have a quick one, Jason.
Yeah.
So the future land use mapping zones we're looking for, you said are agricultural, forestry, conservation, or wetland, is that correct?
Those are examples. So anything that's a non-development area.
Okay.
So you'd have to go into the classification structure for the future land use and see what classification schema the county used at that time.
But
But,
they did
yeah.
have those as options at that time.
They most likely, I don't know if those were the exact options, but that's pretty standard that those would be in there in some flavor. They just have different different semantics, different names. But there's always, there would always be ag, presumably. And sometimes ag and forest. But the key is it's a non-development area plan, development is not planned in that area for 15 years. So which is right in line with the life cycle of a typical comprehensive plan, which is 20 years.
So Jason,
Yeah.
so if these were, so even if they were just, one comprehensive group decided that that would
Yeah.
be good for low residential, or whatever that is, it wouldn't be a formal thing designating it for development at any point in time, so it wouldn't fall under the being planned for development, right?
As long as it's in the comprehensive plan and the comprehensive plan is active, then according to state statute, this map, farmland preservation areas, has to be consistent with it. So the two need to be in sync.
Because
So
I think we obviously the option to develop is something we want to keep, but if we had to decide one designation or the other, could whoever designated it low impact residential development, we could say now 15 years or later from now, but I see your point. How do you resolve this? Protect the prime farmland, but yet retain your rights to develop if that opportunity comes about. Within this plan, that seems kind of hard.
You're right. It is kind of hard. And the tasks that would be required to bring alignment step outside of this process. So those are comprehensive planning tasks, not farmland preservation planning tasks. So there's
But
a
our
whole
ability to make that plan hinges on it, right? Would they have to
Yes.
resolve that there before we could resolve our issue here?
Well, perhaps. And that kind of gets me to the next question was, and I talked to Emily. Emily from our office is facilitating the comprehensive plan revision. I asked her where things are at and who would be responsible in that planning process for identifying future land use. And it sounds like that would be a committee activity. But she also indicated that the Farmland Preservation Committee would probably receive this task from the comp plan committee because you would theoretically be the expert group that would make that call. That would be pretty standard as well. That a committee like this would be the ones making that determination. The problem is we haven't taught the comprehensive planning committee doesn't know any of this. They haven't seen this. They haven't made any call as to how they're going to identify future land use because that part of the process isn't going to begin until next summer. So we are identifying things that we need for this process right now, but the county comprehensive planning process is on a different track. So they're not even going to be getting to this until, like I said, next summer.
Yeah, and that's past our grant deadlines and everything. So,
Yep.
So how would we,
I-
so if we can't designate anything for, as eligible for farmland preservation that has a designator other than ones that accepts, it looks like we won't be able to designate any farmland eligible for farmland preservation.
Perhaps until that issue is resolved. Or unless the county comprehensive planning committee says, all right, we want the farmland preservation planning committee to take on the task of identifying areas of future ag use. And then we
Well-
would incorporate that, but it wouldn't become official until the comp plan is adopted.
So are you saying we could move forward with getting this prepared and the grant deadlines met and then solve this problem later?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, is that we could move this forward with the understanding that we're going to have to come back to it.
Okay, so just so you're clear, zoning is worried and we're all worried that should the opportunity come to develop something, we don't want to lose that right.
Yeah.
By some, so maybe we would have to look through and pick the most likely areas, and zoning would have to assist with that in a big way, that we would want to exclude from the farmland preservation plan because they have the most likelihood of potential development down the road.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I don't see any other way to do this. We wouldn't be able to have any farmland preservation. Do you have any alternate opinion of that?
No, because this is a fairly unique situation. We very rarely have these plans come up where they're open during the same period. And with a new planning process underway, comp planning process underway, that has its own schedule for these activities, it's difficult to coordinate this particular task within that group's working time frame. Now, it's not to say that it can't be done, but the problem we're up against is our time frame, and we are getting to the point where we really need to look at trying to close this out.
Right. So if we set this aside, you say we could put it in later.
Yes, you would basically just be, you wouldn't change anything. Nothing would change. You would keep the same existing map that you have for farmland preservation and then amend that once the county has completed the comprehensive plan. So you have a very clear idea of where the development areas are and the non-development areas are.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, so we'll print this as is with the understanding that zoning and farmland preservation will get together and identify areas of that appear to be the most likely to be developed for exclusion from that map and to their satisfaction and ours, and then we'll put that updated map in the plan as an amendment afterwards.
Yeah, and that's
Sorry.
you'd be taking on a comp plan tasks then related to the farmland preservation plan. And I would want to make sure that the comprehensive planning committee wants to go that route, just to avoid any conflict or issue that may come up.
We
So
have to make zoning happy. That's the thing. We can't jeopardize zoning's capacity to do some of the things they feel we might need to do in the future, and we don't want to. And I don't think the comprehensive plan committee will have any issue with that, because I mean, that's why we're doing this, to get everything squared away.
Yeah, I'm not particularly concerned with the underlying zoning, given there's only 3 zoning districts. It's not really, when you overlay this on the map, it's the general zoning isn't really of much concern, but reconciling the conflict between future land use and farmland preservation, that is a concern, and that's something that could easily be flagged by DATCAP, and essentially invalidate the whole plan. So we want to make sure that does not happen.
Right. Okay.
Jason, this is Pat. Charlie Ortman was just speaking, and we're both on the comp plan update. I've got the ag section. So one possibility is, given that Charlie and I are on this one, is if we updated this with support of this committee, I think it's safe to say there's a pretty good chance that the comp plan committee would back the same thing, and, in the rest of the way. So maybe we just get it through this committee, knowing you've already got 2 people here that are on the comp plan committee, and I've got the ag section. So, and also you might know that we're not exactly having board members raising their hand saying they want to be on the comp plan committee.
Yep.
So I think part of what that means is, if somebody else is willing to sit on these committees, anybody else looking at it's likely to say, yes to it. So I would propose we try to get through it in a way that we think the comp plan committee would support it, given we've got 2 of us here already.
If you would feel comfortable with that, then I would say by all means go that route. If you would prefer to have the full committee part of that discussion, then go that way. But if you're comfortable that the comprehensive planning committee would subscribe to having this group take on that exercise,
I'm
that's really
comfortable.
all you can make.
Comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Charlie?
Jason, is the only part of the farmland preservation plan map that has these issues the one you have presented here, this little square?
No.
Everything? It's the whole thing, right?
Yeah, it's the whole thing. I mean, to give you an example here, let's go the far southern part of the county. Wait for this to label. So now we've got residential medium density. We've got hamlet. I don't know, transportation. There's just a hodgepodge of development land uses that fall within, not necessarily some of these bigger pieces, but.
So is there any way you can separate out that which doesn't have any conflict? And then we could amend the rest of it later and put it up there? Or does this need to be fully baked before you send it to DATCAP?
So this land use layer is not useful anymore. This is out of date. This comes from the old comprehensive plan. So we're presuming that this is just going to go away. This will disappear. And a new future land use layer would then be created as part of the comprehensive planning update process. That new layer may or may not use the same classification system as this one. So that, again, that falls under the purview of the comp plan committee and not necessarily this committee. But this is not something that's a valid instrument any longer, because it is technically out of date.
But at one point that was worked on, and all those areas were recognized as farmland eligible, farmland preservation eligible.
Yeah. I mean, here you see an example. This is a hamlet future land use, but it's ag preservation. A hamlet is basically a catch-all term for a small community. It's a developed community. So this is an issue that extends across the board. Over here in the southwest corner, these are residential medium density. So some pretty clear conflicts that are easy enough to resolve. If this was the working future land use data we had for this cycle, this would be easy enough to resolve because I would just block out those areas and say we have to take these out of the farmland preservation area map because they don't belong. And we could do that now, but the idea that this is out of date, this layer isn't something that will necessarily have a life going forward. I don't know that that's the best approach. I
Yeah,
think
and
honestly,
I see this as being quite a lengthy project, taking a few meetings at least and a lot of input. So it isn't going to be a slow roll
right.
to deconflict these maps, not even close. But if this can be sidelined and you can submit to DATCAP that which keeps us within our our funding guidelines so we don't lose a grant,
Yeah.
then I think we just put this off to the side and we're going to have a whole bunch of discussions. And I think Bruce and Dan are very interested in how that turns out, because the main thing is we don't want to give up the capacity to develop. If it was all designated farmland and down the road we decided we wanted to develop it, could we change the zoning then and excise it from eligible farmland?
No, you could still develop it. You could still develop that property, even though in the farmland preservation plan it says farmland preservation area, it could still be developed. It's just not eligible for the credit.
Yeah,
We
this is, I think we're thinking about two separate things here. So we have the zoning general layer, which dictates how people use the land in the county. But the future land use, what Jason is showing with the text here, that's not correlated to how people actually use the land in Ashland County. It's just planning purposes. And so for the farmland preservation plan, it's important because if farmers want to get into the plan to get the tax credit, they essentially have to be in an orange square here. But it's not related to how someone walks into the zoning office and wants to build a house.
correct.
Okay, so we could take all those other designations off and down the road, it wouldn't be preventive of someone turning it into low residential light development.
Right.
I also want to mention, Jason, this area on the map right now, someone could not actually get into farmland preservation agreement here because this is not in our ag enterprise area. So the way the state is set up right now, a farmer can only enroll in a farmland preservation agreement for tax credit if they're in our ag enterprise area. And that's only around Highway 112 in Marengo and White River.
That's one option for getting a farmland preservation credit, but it's not the only option.
Well, the only other way would be for us to have exclusive ag zoning.
Ye-
And we do not have that, and we probably never will have that in Ashland County.
So that's, yeah, I mean, there still is, I believe, I'm gonna have to look just to make sure, but I'm pretty sure that they could still get a credit.
I think you can still get a credit, but it
Yeah.
might be a half rate.
It's a lower
Yeah.
lower proportion, but you can still get a credit just by being in a farmland preservation mapped area and be entering into an agreement. But it's at a lower rate.
Well, we have tried to enroll a couple farmers in Butternut into farmland preservation, and DATCAP will not allow us to enroll those members because they are not in our AEA.
I'm not sure why that would be the case. That's unless there's some other criteria that they are using, that has not been the case. Because we worked on a number of these in counties that don't have enterprise areas. And the whole intent is to make sure that the people are within the farmland preservation areas have the ability to enter into agreements with DATCAP to get credits. So
Is it how it's zoned there?
I don't think so. I I don't know for sure what the case might be that you're talking about specifically, but that's to my understanding, that's not a requirement that they be in the AEA. You can be and you get a certain credit, but you can also be out of it and get a lower credit.
Okay.
Jason,
Yep.
if I'm understanding everything correctly, I think the easiest thing would be for us to remove all the other designations, seeing as it doesn't prohibit us from going in there and developing whether they're there or not.
Mhm.
But having them designated as farmland preservation eligible gives us some opportunities, the farmers' opportunities they might not have.
Yeah.
So the simplest thing, and if zoning agrees, and we know that it isn't a preclusive thing, it's just, you can still develop it however you wish, then I would suggest just taking those other designations away if Dan and Bruce agree.
Well, I guess my biggest concern is outside of the city, the highest area of growth is Marengo, White River, and town of Ashland. And I expect in the next 15 years, those areas to grow even more. So, I mean, if putting it in farmland preservation doesn't hinder that growth, then I guess I'm okay with it. If it's going to hinder growth, then I would take them out. Nothing would stop people from farming if they chose to do, but at least we allow for the growth to happen then.
And it wouldn't necessarily hinder growth. However, those areas that you're talking about, if their future land use designation is a growth designation, in other words, one that permits growth, that would then make them inconsistent with even being orange, fitting into this category. So it really boils down to what those areas are planned for. I think it makes sense to strategically plan for areas of future growth and development. You mentioned there are core parts of the county that are experiencing some rural growth, and try and isolate the areas most logical for growth in those areas. That gives you at least a framework for creating a much more refined and legally defensible farmland preservation area map than what we have right here.
Jason, can you explain the process of creating new future land use layers?
I can explain a process, but I can't explain the process that Ashland County would use because I'm not working on that. That's Emily. And her process model might very dramatically vary from mine. But typically what we do is we start out with some targets, goals. What do we want to accomplish? And we take those goals that basically are our end point, our end of the game, and we translate that into meaningful metrics for, farmland. What does farmland look like, and how much of it do we want to preserve? Where do we want residential growth? A lot of this is also based on the existing land use and being able to identify where growth has occurred and where it's potentially open to occur. And that layer is also in process of being developed, but is not complete at this time.
Well, I'm not sure where that leaves us. It still seems to me that the easiest thing would be to designate everything that's eligible for farmland preservation as such. And then later on, if we do need, because we can't tell exactly when and where development might happen, but as long as we have the capacity to do that development, then it doesn't matter, right? And I wouldn't say we're being weaselly. It's just we want to make sure all our farmers are eligible for everything they can be. And a farmer might decide to farm on that 5 acres, or I'm going to build some houses. But we don't know when that'll happen or even if, but we just know probably or it might. And we make these designations on really what might happen. Some places have gone that route, and it may or may not mean that they will in the future. They might go back to farming. They might get rid of the houses someday. So do you really think we're being too weaselly in that regard?
No, I don't think so at all. I think
Okay,
those are all fine and normal considerations. We have to be concerned about at the time we submit this map, is this map consistent with planned future land use? Whether or not that actually unfolds. You know, that pattern of future land use that you identify probably isn't going to unfold exactly the way that you think it is. It
right.
rarely works out that way. That's not really relevant here. The only thing that is relevant is that the day we submit this, are these inconsistencies part of this map or are they not part of this map? If they're part of it, that's a problem and it's likely to get thrown out. If they're not, then it's fine. It goes forward and it's adopted and approved and everything moves on just fine. And all of
Okay.
those land use related things that happen can happen. And it doesn't affect this and this doesn't affect that.
Jason, I just called Andrea Topper with DATCAP,
Mhm.
and the only way a farmer can get into farmland preservation right now is if they're in the AEA or we have exclusive ag zoning. Those
So
are
they-
the only two possibilities for them to legally enter the program.
So
And
they
our
don't,
AEA is so small in Ashland County that it does not include this area that's in orange right now.
right.
So I'm
Right.
wondering if it makes more sense for us to just reduce our farmland preservation mapping to the AEA. Because unless Ashland County decides to adopt exclusive ag zoning,
Mhm.
farmers in butternut and anywhere outside of the yellow, the AEA, are never going to be able to enter farmland preservation in this county.
So that must be a relatively recent administrative change from DATCAP.
I've been here since 2018, and it's been here that way ever since I've been here.
It wasn't the process that we followed when we did Bayfield County. Like that was pretty clear.
Yeah, I mean, I just stepped out of the room right now to confirm, and Andrea said, yes, that's absolutely the case.
There's some conflicting information that's out there then.
And
That-
like I said, we've tried to enroll 2 people down in Butternut, and we cannot get them in the program because they're not in that AEA. But I'm
Mhm.
wondering if this would simplify the process for the county.
It would greatly simplify the process for the county.
I have a clarifying question. If we ever wanted to expand the AEA, does the land need to be in the farmland preservation area first?
The restrictions require you have to have 5 consecutive farmers. Their land has to be adjoining. And then there's a minimum amount of acres. I don't remember the exact number, 2,000 acres and 5 consecutive farmers to develop a new AEA unless you're adding on to the existing here, but it has to be contiguous with it would have to be contiguous with our current AEA. So we have not been able to expand it yet. We have tried multiple times.
If you're an adjoining landowner not currently in the AEA, does it need to be identified as farmland preservation in the plan in order to join that AEA?
Yes. So we would have to petition the state. If we have a landowner that's not in the yellow area here on the map, and they want to, and it's contiguous with this, we can petition to have that land included. And that's the only way they would be able to enroll in farmland preservation, is if they're in the AEA, or if we would adopt exclusive ag zoning, which Bruce, I mean, in your opinion, do you see that happening here? No, because that means that people could never develop that land for any other use other than agriculture.
But if this adjoining land is not identified as farmland preservation in the farmland preservation plan, how do you adopt that land into the AEA if that landowner so wanted it?
If they want to be in the AEA, we would petition DATCAP to include those lands
So it wouldn't matter that that land is not in farmland, the farmland preservation plan map that we
Correct.
put in place.
Farmland preservation helps when you have that land designated, and you also would establish zoning that would be exclusive ag zoning. Then the farmers could enroll into a farmland preservation agreement because you have that layer of zoning there and not necessarily the ag enterprise area.
So in that instance, it wouldn't, there is really no point in having our farmland preservation plan map larger than the AEA,
Correct.
what you're saying.
That's what I'm, yeah. Yeah. I think it would help us in this circumstance to reduce our farmland preservation area to our AEA because we don't have any advantage of having the farmland preservation area outside of the ag enterprise area in our county in the circumstance that we don't think we're ever going to have exclusive ag zoning. If we were intending to add exclusive ag zoning down the road in the future, then I think it would be helpful to maintain some of those farmland preservation areas as designated. But since we don't think we're going to go that route, it doesn't necessarily serve as an advantage to us.
I got something maybe to consider because I think I know what you're saying too, Riley, because if it's not in the orange and we still want to apply for an AEA, is there going to be a conflict? That's what I'm trying to think about because like if we want to expand the AEA, you know, we do have to petition the state, but if it's not in farmland preservation, if it's not in the orange, then is there going to be a conflict of trying to get into an AEA? That would, I don't know if that's what you're trying to say, now, but that's one of the things I'm thinking about. So if we, even if we had, you know, this is the main part is Town of White River, Town of Marengo. Even if we designated our townships as the orange as farmland preservation, so if we wanted to expand the AEA, it wouldn't be conflicting. Plus, we still can develop. Does that make sense?
But you have to get it zoned agricultural only, right?
You wouldn't have to be zoned ag, no. Because we're talking exclusive zoning, which we're not going to do. But the counties like that orange mapping is farmland preservation eligible. And that would be my only concern is if we don't include some of these places with farmland preservation eligibility, would it be conflicting if we ever try to get it, you know, expand our AEA?
And I believe the farmland preservation area and the AEA, they're both the same type of overlay. So you could go straight from not being designated anything to being agricultural enterprise area. So it doesn't have to follow an intermediate step of being a farmland preservation area. Now you could do that. You could identify the parcels along the periphery, you know, for, I don't know, a quarter mile and say that this is an area where we would call our AEA expansion zone. I mean, just
the other point there is the area around the AEA is also the highest development density in the county at the moment.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you address that.
So I'm trying to pop the map back up because it crashed. So,
so I think do we want to make the farmland preservation area the same as the ag enterprise zone, Mary Jo? She's caught there.
I mean, that would be my suggestion.
Okay, well, I'll make that motion, but then we also have to undo that farmland designation at the Land and Water Conservation Committee meeting, right? And then send it to the county for approval? If we undesignate an area? What is the ripple effect of this?
there's none. You don't technically undesignate anything. It this just becomes the new farmland preservation area framework going forward.
So what we do with this plan is that designates
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
Okay. So I'll
Hey.
put that motion on the table. Let me, I'll move to make our farmland preservation area the same as our ag, whatever that is, an enterprise zone. Okay, we need a second. Can we do that here, Jason? Is this meeting appropriate for that?
You can do that here, and it gives me the guidance I need to go ahead and create the statutorily required maps at the appropriate scale to submit with the
Okay.
plan.
Then someone give Jason a second and then let's talk about it some more. Anyone?
This is Pat. I'll second just to put it on the table.
Okay.
And then I'd like to ask a question. Jason, the map you were showing earlier with the orange, that was an old map. Is there any reason we couldn't take the most current map, filter out everything that isn't appropriate for farmland preservation consideration at this point, and then use that map, even though it's bigger than, practically speaking, we are going to make use of, but then at least it captures everything at the moment and removes everything? Would that be a solution?
Well, I think one of the problems is we don't have a layer that describes future land use. And that's something that's in the statute.
Mhm.
So without that, it's kind of an exercise in futility.
So then on the future land use, some of these townships are growing. Are there criteria, like low density housing, medium? Are there percent increases in housing over a period of time that are used to benchmark that? Because in some areas of the state, the rate of growth we have up here, they say, well, it's hardly growing. But for us up here, if there's any growth at all, we kind of say, wow, there's growth. So do we have criteria metrics, and do these areas that we locally think are growing, do they actually reach those metrics and therefore create an inconsistency with the zoning or consideration for farmland preservation?
As far as I know, the previous plan had no metrics in it. I can't speak to the current process because they're not there yet. So I don't know what that will look like, but the previous plan did not have any metrics that necessarily defined what those categories meant, which is kind of problematic. So
And then there's another issue, and Tim, this is in your court now, nutrient management plans. To get those credits, you need a nutrient management plan, and there's limited interest in those. So how many farmers, and potentially future farmers, are we really talking about here if we can't even get them into a nutrient management plan, as a requirement to qualify for these credits? In other words, thinking back to what Mary Jo suggested, how much time and effort is worth putting into keeping the map the size it is versus what Mary Jo suggested, if very few, if any, are going to take advantage
That's a
of
good
it
point, because
anyway?
right now I think we only have 4 farmers in farmland preservation. And that was definitely one of my thoughts of, like, if it doesn't pay to get too crazy about it, if we can't utilize what we have. I guess the only other thought I had is, isn't there a layer on the map of prime farmland, like soils? Because that would be the only other suggestion I would have, is just only utilize the prime farmland based off soil types as a perimeter. But yeah, I would agree that we don't have a lot of farmers in farmland preservation, so we don't need the whole county to be and until we start getting, I would say at least 50% of the land that's in the AEA, we don't really need to worry about expanding it too much. So
Also, Jason, you say that if we want to do more about this, we can do it later at our leisure and amend this map in the future?
You can amend this map in the future, yes. You just have to go through the process of creating the maps at the appropriate scale and providing the documentation to DATCAP.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it can be amended and should be amended as the situation warrants. I think, but because of the fact the county is taking on a concurrent comprehensive planning process, and these two don't align on a timeline, that it makes perfect sense that that would be the approach. It's really the only logical approach.
Jason, suppose there's a farmer in Butternut that, would like the tax credits. And so far, they haven't been able to get into it. But what if the county was willing to rezone it exclusive ag and it's just that person's farm? One, can we do that? We usually call that spot zoning and that's not a good thing, but could we just say, yep, we'll make that exclusive ag if that's what the farmer wants? And then they would qualify if they, have the nutrient management plan and, that way, if there really is somebody, then we have a simple local way of dealing with it.
Well, you first have to get over the hurdle of adopting farmland preservation zoning. And that's, depends on each county is different, but I mean, it's a process to go through that. You'd have to create a map that identifies the areas where farmland preservation zoning would be applied. I don't necessarily think that would be a spot zoning case because you have to start somewhere. And just by having the district available, in your suite of zoning districts, it's moving it forward. But it's up, realistically that's possible. But you'd also have to entertain the, whether or not that's feasible for Ashland County to develop farmland preservation zoning, and whether there's political support to do that at the town level.
So with the future land use, we don't know that yet. So it seems like there's two options. One is we wait till we have enough information on future land use, and then we just do this then and amend the plan. Or we do what Mary Jo suggested, make it smaller for now and then deal with, changing things later, if we need to. I don't, do you know what the pros and cons are, Jason, or a recommendation?
Smaller for now lets us move it along and gets us in our timelines, and we can amend anything we want later if we see fit. So there's no downside.
At a minimum, I would absolutely include the area within the AEA and the external area based on the conversation that Mary Jo had with DATCAP. That really, without having farmland preservation zoning, having all this external orange area is of no benefit to the county or to the property owner. If DATCAP is saying they're not going to offer tax credits for just being in a farmland preservation area, then what's the purpose of having it defined through this broad spectrum of the county? It doesn't make any sense.
You never know when things change in Madison and maybe they will start offering a tax credit.
Yeah, that very well may be the case.
I'd just like to point out that the reason why the county board made the planning committee a standing committee is so it can be amended at a later date.
Is everybody ready to vote on that motion? You want me to take it for a minute, Jason, for this
What's
motion?
that? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor and a second to amend our farmland preservation outline to match the ag enterprise zone outline. Any further discussion? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Jason.
Absolutely. All right, so just so I'm clear, then we will go ahead with this yellow boundary. And that will be just the farmland preservation area map for going forward. So I can go ahead and start creating this at the scale that's appropriate for each town.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Will do. Trying to pull the agenda back up here. Okay. Document review and revisions. So Autumn should have provided you with a list of final changes and revisions that she wanted to take a look at. Unfortunately, she had a conflicting meeting today, so she's not able to attend. Did you have any points of clarification on that? Or have you all had an opportunity to look at those narrative items that need some formalization, need some approval from this group?
I think I'm fine with all the revisions made. Everybody else?
So, I mean, we can just take these one by
Okay.
one rather than trying to do the whole thing, because I think some of this is more of a question. So the survey, for example, the ag survey information that was included in the previous farmland preservation plan, that survey information is well out of date. It does provide a point in time reference if you want to keep that included in the plan. It's not necessarily reflective of what's going on today or what people's opinions would be today, but we would keep it in there as an archival, or maybe even remove it entirely if you feel that it's past its useful life and it's time to move on. So I would defer to you as a committee for some guidance on how you'd want to approach that. I don't necessarily see the benefit of keeping it, but that's your call at the end of the day.
The old plan, it will be kept somewhere readable. If you went back to the old plans, it would be in the old plan,
Yep.
just not this one. So
Yeah,
it is so it will be archived.
Yeah.
After a fashion. Or then I'm fine with your suggestion.
Yeah, I did ask Autumn, her and I did correspond with her on all of these points that she had sent. So I did answer all of them for her.
Okay.
And I asked her if it's typical to keep it in there, and she had mentioned that you said it's not typical to keep those
Right.
surveys.
Right.
So I told her that I was okay with that.
Okay.
And per Charlie's question here, as long as we have a copy and we have electronic files of this from last time around, so I don't see any reason why we need to keep that survey information in the new plan.
Okay. Well, that's easy enough. I'll have her remove it. Then in the forestry section, page 3-13. I don't have a copy of the document open just because I have too many other things open at the same time. Does anyone have a point of reference for what page 313, the forestry section is? If you provided clarification to Autumn, Mary Jo, can you
Yeah,
just summarize
this is a very small paragraph. It's called Forestry Economic Growth and Trends, and it said forests are one of the key assets of Ashland County and account for significant jobs and recreational opportunities. And then there was 4 bullets, and it said forestry related in employment in 2024 resulted in 28 jobs in the county. The second bullet talked about direct economic effect of these industries, producing general revenue of 8.8 million with 7.8 million in 2024 earnings. A third bullet included forest-related industries had an average earning per job of $59,923 in 2024. And then the fourth bullet said the forest industry generates 800.5 thousand directly in taxes. So it was a very small bit of information, but I thought it was adequate just to keep that. It doesn't take up a lot of space, and forestry is a major economic driver in our county. So I really didn't see any reason why we should remove that. If anybody feels differently, feel free to speak up. I don't have a super strong opinion.
All right, sounds like we have agreement then.
I have a quick question. When we say 800.5 thousand, are we saying 850,000? Or are we saying, or 800,500?
That's not a standard
simple
way
to
of,
just write, say 800, just write out 800,500?
That's a good question. My assumption is that it's 800, 805.
The way you read it can mean either one. So just writing it out numerically would make the most sense.
800, 500,000, 800,500.
yep. Yeah,
I'm guessing that's
unusual.
what it is, but I guess we should confirm that, Jason.
Yeah, I will ask her about that. That's an unusual way to express a number like that. All right, page 3-16, wastewater facilities. Reference to the last sentence and the question about NR 151 ordinance change. Does it change that statement? Do you recall what that statement was, Mary Jo?
Yeah. Trying to find the exact sentence. Oh, it actually starts on page 3-15. It was a small paragraph about wastewater facilities. It reads, the city of Ashland, city of Mellon, village of Butternut, town of LaPointe, and unincorporated Glidden have sanitary sewer services. The rest of the county residences and businesses rely on private septic systems and wells, including farmsteads. Ashland County reviews and permits the private wastewater treatment systems, or POUTs, although no permit is currently needed for storage of livestock manure. So I responded to her that our 2018 Agriculture Performance Standard Ordinance does change this sentence. I told her just to remove the last part of the sentence referring, because the first part of it talks specifically about wastewater treatment, and the second half of it is referring to animal waste, which is a completely different topic. So I told her to change the paragraph to read, wastewater facilities. Ashland County Zoning Department reviews and permits the private wastewater treatment systems, or POUTs. And then it doesn't make any reference to the animal waste there. That is covered under a different part of the farmland preservation, which refers to the NR 151 ag performance standards.
Okay, anybody have any questions about that? The recommended change? Okay, so on the last one, the second bullet point, page 3-34, does NR 151 negate this bullet point?
Okay, the second bullet, this was in a paragraph that reads, some of the notable information concerning Ashland County groundwater includes, and then there were 4 bullets. One of them talks about the municipal water systems. The second bullet, which she's referring to, reads, Ashland County has not adopted an animal waste storage ordinance that may help to protect the groundwater and surface water resources. And we did adopt that ordinance in 2018. So actually, I told her to delete that bullet, but maybe I will ask her to just update the bullet to say that the ordinance was adopted in 2018 to help protect groundwater and surface water. So I will ask her just to update that bullet. That ordinance was passed
Okay.
in 2018.
Okay. All right.
And then I did ask her about that third bullet there, which it reads, there are currently 8 open activities involving leaking underground storage tanks in Ashland County. And I was not familiar with that, so I asked her if it was accurate. And she said that she utilized the DNR offers a database referred to as BRRTS. And it's a database where you can search for open, closed, or redevelopment activities within the state that deals with leaking storage. So that is accurate for Ashland County. And then that's all the edits and updates that we had.
All right, any questions about that? Okay. All right, next steps. Well, I think based on the discussion that we had earlier, the next steps will be to put together all the mapping, put the document all together, submit that to you for final review. We're going to have to take we have to create the farmland preservation area mapping has to be created for each town, regardless of whether or not they have any in their boundary or not. We'd want to make sure that we get final approval of this, everything, the entire package, that gives us ample time to close this out by the end of the year. Is it the December 31st, Mary Jo, as the official closeout? I don't recall off the top of my head.
We have a January deadline with DATCAP, but you said as long as we forwarded the draft plan to them for review,
Yep.
which they require up to 3 months for review, but as long as we got it to them before the January date,
Yep.
we would be within the window of receiving approval in a timely manner.
So that gets us hopefully one more meeting so we can review everything as a complete package before we send that to DATCAP. And I'd like to do that, as soon as possible next month, but recognizing that we've got a lot of weird things going on with schedules in the next few weeks with Thanksgiving and then the Christmas holiday. So I'd like to try and get a meeting poll out, have Autumn get a meeting poll out to you for full draft plan review and discussion as soon as possible. Hopefully yet this week, but if not yet this week, then early next week. And she can pull some appropriate days, times to basically get this on the agenda. And because we'll need to have one full meeting where we just take everything into consideration and then approve or recommend that document for approval by the county board. And then we can go ahead and forward that to DATCAP. Does that work? If I have Autumn go ahead and pull a date sometime within the next, that first couple of weeks of December.
Why would we need to look at it all again?
To recommend the plan for approval by the county board.
Couldn't we do that now?
You haven't seen the plan. We haven't put it together yet. So I need to put all the mapping, the whole thing needs to be put together, including all the mapping and what we just talked about.
Okay, so
the farmland preservation plan mapping has to be part of that.
All right. Then how soon do you want to do this?
Ideally, if we did it in the first week or two of December.
When's the earliest you'll be ready for it? Is that what you're saying? That's as soon as you'll be ready to present it?
No, I'm basically going to turn this over to Autumn. I'll give you the final product. That meeting should be pretty straightforward. You're just going to look at the document, verify that everything is as it should be, and you'll have it in advance of that meeting as well. So it's more of an administrative thing than anything else.
We're kind of struggling to get quorum because of the season.
Yeah.
But next week or the last week in November would be too soon for your side?
I can't.
Well, he's mentioning that we have hunting season and Thanksgiving, so there's going to be a lot of people tied up in those activities. That's why he was suggesting the first week of December.
Well, I'm just trying to look at it as soon as possible, because, well, if we can poll the group right now and figure out a date. So what would be your earliest suggestion then, Jason?
I don't have one. It's entirely based on your availability. I fully intend to have everything compiled in terms of the mapping and the narrative by Thanksgiving. So
Okay,
anytime after that.
so the week of Thanksgiving, the 23rd through the 29th, right? That's nobody's gonna be available for that?
Right. I would, yeah, that would be a bad time to schedule a meeting.
Okay, so December 1st would be good. That's a Monday. So I want everyone to look at their calendars and pick a date that we can fight about.
Well, he had said that he can have Autumn send out the online poll, the way we've been setting the meetings. If she does that, we can just set it up that way.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay with that?
I agree.
Is that all right on your end then, Jason?
Yeah, that's fine.
Jason, just have her avoid December 4th because we do already have a Land Conservation Committee meeting scheduled for that morning.
Okay, I will.
And we're checking the county board calendar real quick just to make sure there's no other conflicts for the first week of December.
Okay. Just curious, is it within the county procedures to allow for a email vote? So if you can't, it doesn't look like there's a possibility of getting a quorum of the committee together, could you take an email vote on recommending approval by the county board? And at
No,
least, no? Okay.
no. I don't know if we're having one in December because it would fall the week of Christmas. Yeah, because it'd fall the week of Christmas. And we just passed our budget.
We just approved this at our next county board meeting. We
Yeah,
just let DATCAP know that this is on the next agenda.
It's been recommended for approval, meaning it's out of this committee.
Yes.
It's an administrative part of the process.
Yeah.
So the board doesn't have to approve it. In fact, the board shouldn't approve it, until they're ready to actually do that. So if they're ready in December or even January, that's fine.
Okay, so you would send that plan to DATCAP before we even approve it? The one that comes out of committee?
If it's not been approved by the county board, yes. But we want to make sure that it's out of the committee,
Okay,
this committee.
so you're confident we're in no danger of missing any money deadlines?
Not missing any money deadlines, no.
Okay,
I don't see any problem with that at all.
all right. Thank you very much, Jason.
Yeah.
And so Autumn's gonna send out a poll. Everybody, please keep your first week in December clear till we see what she's got. And we've run out of agenda then, haven't we, Jason?
Yes, sir, we have.
Okay. Any final thoughts by anybody? Any seconds, thirds, fourths? All right, seeing none. The committee will take a motion for adjournment in a second.
I'll second.
Nobody's motioned yet. You'll motion. Can we get a second?
Jim will second.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second to adjourn. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Jason, thank you very much. And please give
Thank you.
Autumn our thanks. You both, I don't know how you guys are doing it. I spread too thin and I don't do a tenth of what you're doing, but we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jason.
Thank you.